Hey, what's up everyone? My name is Jeff, and today we're going to jump into the top 10 biggest game-changing cards from Ikoria Lair Behemoths. And I have a bunch of really, some of my favorite cards in this set, in this list, but I am diving into the cards that I think are going to be the biggest game changers, the ones that are going to change the standard format the most. I am focused more on standard. I don't really play the older formats. I may touch on a little bit of historic because that's what's on Arena and that's what I play. But before we jump into the top 10, I have a few honorable mentions, so let's dive right into it. So honorable mention number one, Unpredictable Cyclone. I do think this deck is going to make some changes for sure in the format, but because it is unpredictable, I think it's going to keep it from being a number one game changer in the top 10 here. So Enchanting Cyclone, what it does, 5 mana red, if the cycling ability of another non-land card would cause you to draw a card, instead exile cards from top of your library until you exile a card that shares a type with the cycled card. So type is instant, sorcery, creature, enchantment, artifact. And you may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Then you put the exile cards that were cast this way into the bottom of the library in random order. So in this set, there are a few cards that are definitely busted with this. First off, I think that Yadero is really crazy with this because it is one of the best cycling cards. You could just play only 4 copies of this card in it, and then anytime you cycle Yadero, it's going to be share creature type with another Yadero, so you're going to get an 8/8 trampling with haste. So I think there's some really best things you can definitely do with this. I think if you're playing a Fires of Invention, cycling works really well with Fires of Invention, so you can actually cycle all the cards away that are in hand with the extra mana you have. Dig for the big things. You can play spells like Boon of the Wishgiver with this. So you cycle a sorcery card, and you could set it up to where you don't have that many sorcery cards. You know, maybe just your board wipes, your interaction that you want to have in there, and then maybe 4 Boon of the Wishgiver, which with Fires of Invention oftentimes is going to be like a free draw 4 card. And so I actually think there's a really powerful Fires of Invention deck with Unpredictable Cyclone, but I think there's a lot of other good things in that deck already, so I'm not sure this will necessarily make a big change. It'll just be like maybe a one of in the fringe, or possibly a combo deck that ends up going crazy. Who knows? Second honorable mention, Song of Creation. This one didn't make it into my top 10 list because Narset just completely shuts this card down. And that is a really big deal. And also there's a really big drawback with it. Let's go ahead and dive into the card. 4 mana cost, 1 in Temur mana. Enchantment, you may play an additional land on each of your turns. That's a really big deal. Whenever you cast a spell, draw 2 cards. Being able to play additional lands really helps with that. You can end up playing multiple things with this card. At the beginning of your end step, discard your hand. So that is a really big downside. If you're playing the adventure cards, you can kind of get around it where you're not going to be, you know, the discarding your hand doesn't matter as much as long as you get to hit a lot of stuff. But I think that because it gets shut down so easily by one card that's used pretty consistently, and I think it will be seen even more set with Narset, that just says that if opponents can't draw more than 1 card each turn. And so not stopping the ability to draw the second card or even any other card, then having to discard your hand every turn is brutal with this card. There's still cool things that you can do with it. There's a lot of fun stuff you can do with Song of Creation, and I think that there are going to be those times that you're just going to go crazy and get so much value out of this card that it doesn't really matter that occasionally going up against deck with Narset. But I think as far as a competitive standpoint, that's the only card people have to play to just completely shut this down. Third and final honorable mention, then I promise we'll jump into our top 10. Yorion Sky Nomad. The champion side of it says your starting deck contains at least 20 cards more than the minimum deck size. If your deck has that when you first build it, then you slot this 1 copy of this into your sideboard, and you basically get it as your commander. You can cast it 1 time from a command zone almost, from outside the game, 1 time in the game. You can still slot this into your main deck as well. Like if you're playing 80 card deck with this, the issue is that you're not going to have as much consistency, especially if you're playing best of 3 mode. You're not going to have your sideboard drawing into your sideboard as consistently, which your sideboard cards a lot of times are what win you games against certain matchups, and so not having the consistency of hitting those is pretty brutal. But the cool thing about Yorion is that you can definitely play this in your main deck as well as in the sideboard, and it works pretty well that way. That's one thing about the companion cards, is that not all of them actually work great with being able to have them in your main board and in your companion mode. But this one does. And so its effect, 5 mana, flying, when Yorion enters the battlefield, exile any number of non-land permanents you own and control. and then return those cards to the battlefield at the beginning of your next end step. So there's already a really good blue-white blink deck. There's a lot of really good enter the battlefield effects in the blue-white colors, and this can easily be brought into other colors as well because it's blue and white. You could, you don't have to splash both colors to do it because of the hybrid mana there. But you can utilize this so well. There's so many good, first off, creature ETB effects, but this is also any other non-land permanents. And so if you want to just bounce, and Elspeth Conquers Death, and get the trigger again, there's so many good things that Yorion can hit that I think it's worth playing. I'm not sure if you want to put it as a companion or maybe as like 2 of in an already blink deck with Thassa, just because it's a good card in general. I wish that this had Flash. That would be really broken, but it would be really broken. Anyway, this card is good, but I think it's on the fringe of being game changing. All right, let's jump into the top 10 game changingness cards in Ikoria, and the first one here, and this is number 1, and I'm going down from here because I just like to do it that way better. Anyway, is Luminous Broodmoth. Luminous Broodmoth, 4 mana, 3/4 flying insect. Whenever a creature you control without flying dies, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control with a flying counter. Yeah, so any creature you control that doesn't have flying, as long as Luminous Broodmoth is out, it comes back for free with a flying counter. So not only does it come back, it comes back more busted. All right, so we already got to see a little bit of like Nightmare Shepherd doing something like this. Okay, something's gonna die, you can exile it, which is kind of a downside by itself. Some things you want in the graveyard. So you exile it, get to bring it back as a 1/1, and it's a Nightmare instead, which is kind of cool. But and that was played quite a bit in Black. It was played in a lot of different combo decks. There's a lot of cool things you can do with that. With Luminous Broodmoth, you get to bring it back without any of the downside, and if any, well, for sure you get an upside of being able to get it flying, and you can actually remove those counters and do some really broken things in other formats. I'm not sure if there's any way to do it in Standard right now. I've not really looked into it, but this will absolutely change the game. The fact that this card is in Standard is going to break the format in so many ways, just because I think first off, all the aristocrat style decks that are dealing damage whenever stuff dies, any aggro decks that are wanting to put a bunch of board onto the battlefield, and then as long as they're on the play and can get out of Luminous Broodmoth on turn 4 before the board wipe happens, they're going to be able to keep their board even after Luminous Broodmoth happens. So there's so many instances where this is just completely busted. I do worry that this is too good. I worry that this will probably get banned at some point. At least in older formats. It may not get banned in Standard, because I think that the effect is crazy good. It is very, very powerful, but I think it's manageable. I think it's good for a different type of deck than what will break the format completely. This is going to definitely change the format a lot, and like I said, give a lot of power and give a lot of interaction to the board wipes, to just a lot of and not only that, but give a lot of potential for combo decks. And so Luminous Broodmoth, by far the number 1 in this set. It is so stinking powerful. I don't really have much else to say other than what this does is busted, and we're going to be figuring out how more and more ways to break this card throughout the next few years. It's really fun. Okay, number 2 is Fiend Artisan. Fiend Artisan gets +1/+1 for each creature in your graveyard. A 2 mana 1/1, so it already has 1/1. Like if this was a 2 mana 0/0 that still got stuff from your graveyard, it would be a little bit worse. But the fact that it will survive even a board wipe or even someone exiling your graveyard, stuff like that, first off, is really cool. And second off, this is like a Tarmogoyf, which if you haven't played Magic for a while, and honestly, I've never played with Tarmogoyf because I'm a newer player, and I've only really played the Standard formats, but in Modern, Tarmogoyf is a really busted card that basically gets bigger for different card types in your graveyard. And Fiend Artisan is very similar, except it can be even more busted because you're going to be playing more creatures in your deck than there are card types. Card types, there's only like 6 or 7. I don't even know how many there are actually. Creature, artifact, instant, sorcery, planeswalker, and enchantment. Land. So like 8 different ones that you can get. And so Fiend Artisan, of course, you can have more than 8 creatures in your graveyard. It's not, I mean, it's not going to be easy to get to that number, but in the late game, it's not it's not unlikely that you could have, you know, 10. And so this could be a 2 mana 11/11 in your deck that also has the ability of being able to pay X and a mana, black or green, tap it, sacrifice another creature, which you want more stuff in the graveyard anyway with this. Sometimes that's pretty good. Search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost X or less, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library, activate this ability only in time you would cast a sorcery. Okay. So the next amazing and busted game-changing thing about this card is that it tutors. You get to sacrifice something, and as long as you have enough mana, so you do have to pay the mana for it, so it's not like the most amazing tutor, but it still is a tutor that immediately gets it onto the battlefield, as long as you can activate the ability. And it's also so activate it only time you would cast a sorcery. Okay, I had to reread that because if it was also at instant speed, completely busted. But Gary, Gray Merchant of Asphodel, I think is his name, when does damage equal to its devotion to black. Well, Fiend Artisan also helps with that. We can, with 6 mana, go digging for a Gray Merchant. You do have to sacrifice something that might have helped with the devotion, but that's not going to be that difficult. That's not going to hurt us too much, especially if it's gaining you enough life and pumping Fiend Artisan enough that you can maybe win against an aggro deck. And so I think Fiend Artisan for sure will change the format completely, not just standard. It's going to change everything going backward as well. But I think it's a very, very powerful card. I think that I'm intrigued to see how busted it is in standard. If anything, it's probably going to be a little bit less busted in standard than in other formats, but it's still definitely going to be in a really good deck. It's going to be something that I'm not sure we'll see play immediately just because of how busted Broodmoth is and the Aristocrats deck, the Fires of Invention decks are going to be. But this is a card that will forever be probably going to be the best 2-drop for a long time. It's really, really powerful. In slot number 3 is Shark Typhoon, the Sharknado. I love the flavor of that, and it's also a little bit disturbing, but hilarious and awesome at the same time. All right, so 6 mana cost enchantment. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, create an XX blue shark creature token with flying, which is huge. Whenever X is that spell, where X is the spell's converted mana cost. So if you cast a 3 fairy, a 3 mana Teferi, you're going to get a 3/3 blue shark creature token with flying as well. This card is completely busted, especially because Fire of Inventions is in the deck. But cards like this have been around in standard in the past and have been completely busted in a control format. The fact that we have Fires of Invention right now means you don't even have to play as control-y with this. You just get this down, and all of a sudden you have enough mana to be cycling into a bunch of things that you want to be playing. You can cast things for free, and it's just completely busted. The other thing too is that this also helps Fires of Invention decks because it gets to cycle itself at instant speed and create a body. So this is the other side of it that is insanely powerful, that I think is going to get overlooked. Like, people are going to go for the greed value of being able to play Shark Typhoon at 6 mana instead of just sometimes cycling, even for a 4/4, even if you have the 6 mana to do it, sometimes being able to create an instant speed 4/4 creature and draw a card is so good. And so that's the other side of this. Cycle X and 2 mana. Whenever you cycle Shark Typhoon, create an XX blue shark creature token with flying. So really powerful card overall. I think that the fact that you can flash in a blocker against the aggro decks that may have found their questing beast or something like that, and you get to still hold up mana when you're playing a Fires of Invention deck, you already have a Shark Typhoon out. Sometimes that's exactly what you need, is just, okay, instant speed. I have a way to interact with what you're doing. I still have mana up, and because I can't cast stuff at instant speed because of Fires of Invention, all of a sudden they have a way to do something at instant speed and create a body at instant speed. And I'm really terrified about cycling with Fires of Invention. Honestly, I think that cycling in general is just going to destroy how good that card is. Luckily, we have a lot of enchantment removal. We have a lot of things like that have come into this format as well. But Shark Typhoon definitely going to be changing the format. You'll see play with this for a long time to come, especially because it says non-creature spell rather than just instant or sorcery. And the fact that these guys are flying and they can actually get in through the air evasively, this card is bonkers. I feel like I'm going to say that about every card in this list, but my goodness, this card is definitely bonkers. Because it's 6 mana, it's down at the 3rd slot here instead of being up towards the top. But it's still definitely up there. I think the fact that it is 6 mana is the biggest drawback for it, but Control has had 6-drop win conditions for a long time. They're gonna find a way to make this work, and this will definitely work. And in 4th place, Winota, Joiner of Forces. Man, my dyslexia has such a hard time with that word. But Winota, whenever a non-human creature you control attacks, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may put a human creature card from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and attacking, it gains indestructible until end of turn. Put the rest of the cards in the bottom of the library in random order. This card just like keeps getting better the more that you read it. And there's a few pieces I think that are the reason why a lot of people are looking over this card. Just the way that this is worded kind of makes it sound interesting. But first off, let's address this. It's a 4 mana legendary creature that's a 4/4. So 4 mana 4/4 already amazing. It does something the turn it comes out as long as you have a non-human creature. So whenever a non-human creature you control attacks, first off, it says a non-human creature, not one or more or anything like that. So this means every single non-human creature that you control that is attacking will trigger this ability. So let's say that you're playing like Goblin Instigator that creates 2 bodies on turn 2. Let's say that you're playing a few other things like that will be able to put some bodies on the battlefield. Even if you're just like playing things that create soldier tokens that aren't humans. If you're creating any kind of token deck and a bunch of humans in your deck, like Kenrith, like Agent of Treachery, which I mean that's a little bit on the fringe side, but you can definitely do it. I don't think it's that difficult, especially if you can build a tokens deck with Winota. Then you play out Winota on turn 4, attacking with a bunch of your non-human creatures. Each one of them will trigger. You get to look at the top 6 cards of your library. First off, that's ridiculous. If this was like 3, it would still be ridiculous. But 6 cards in your library, as long as you're playing any number of humans in this deck, you're going to be able to find them. Then you can get your Tajiks out. You can get out, Fervent Champions, whatever, any extra thing that gains indestructible and is tapped and attacking until the end of turn. So the way to look at Winota, first off, it's a really powerful card in just a straight up deck that's running non-humans and humans, which our typical Boros type deck is going to be doing that. You're going to have things like Krenko, which Krenko would be sweet with this, creating a bunch of tokens. Then anyway, that'd be sweet. But if you're playing things like Tajik, playing things, man, just so many good cards with this. All of those cards come in tapped and attacking. I think Winota can legitimately, as long as you have a few tokens out in the battlefield by turn 4, turn 5, just be a straight up I win the game card that turn. Because with enough humans coming out, our Kenrith that gives everything trample if you have 1 more mana, if you have Agent of Treachery to steal their blockers, because this happens during the attack phase before they get to block even, you can steal their blockers and then just swing in, and in the extra 2, 4, 6, 8 points of damage that this gets in with, will definitely be enough to close out the game. I promise you that the indestructible attackers that are tapped and attacking here in this aggro deck, they don't go away after the turn. Are ridiculous. Honestly, this may deserve a slot a little bit higher. Like I'm the more and more I'm thinking about this card, it may be better than Breedmoth. The fact that this works with Breedmoth as well is pretty busted, Oh my gosh, this is gonna be bad. The nice thing is that Boros is my favorite colors, and so while everyone else is going to be playing Control, I get to play Winota. I'm so excited to play with this card. So this is definitely going to change the game up. I think that people are going to find answers. I think this is going to lead us to a place of like a little bit more of a combo deck type of style, where it's going to be a little bit more heavy control, that they're just going to have to be able to answer whatever they're playing immediately. Like Winota, we have to be able to either remove it before we go to combat phase, counter it before it hits the battlefield, or something like that. And so I do think that Winota is going to be changing the game completely based off of, you have to have answers for this card, because I don't think it's that difficult to build a deck around this that can legitimately win the game on turn 4, turn 5. I mean, things won't go right perfectly. I mean, having everything go right every time by turn 4 isn't the best, but by turn 5, I don't think it's that difficult, as long as you have this in hand and a way to have 3 creatures on the battlefield. And I don't think it's that difficult to make them non-human creatures. You're gonna have is gonna break the game. I'm really excited for this card because of the colors it's in. I can see everyone else being very worried about this, and this one probably is the one that will I could see getting banned quickest, just because I think that whenever a non-human creature you control attacks might have been miswritten. I think it should have been one or more. So we'll see. I kind of hope that at some point Wizards, especially because things are more digital nowadays, that they can get to a point where they are going to be able to just change a text on a card and reprint it or give it back to us again on Arena, even if it was printed that way on paper. They kind of did that with a Johnny's Pridemate, just so that the triggers happened automatically instead of having us respond to it every time, because it was so annoying on Arena. That I could see them doing something like that with Winota, where maybe this is too busted, it does get banned, and then they get to change something like that. I'd love for Oko to come back and have it be a -1 as a second ability instead of a +1. That's all it would take to make Oko play it, actually be able to be played again. But we'll see if that happens. Anyway, let's go to the next one. All right, in slot number 5, we have Heartless Act. So we were talking about Winota, we were talking about Luminous Breedmoth, we were talking about just all of these busted cards, massive sharks that are going to be coming down into the battlefield. We need to have a way to remove them consistently, and Heartless Act does that. So destroy target creature with no counters on it. So first off, it's a 2-mana instant, and you can choose one of these two options. Destroy target creature with no counters on it, or remove up to 3 counters from target creature. The fact that you have a second ability with this, even just removing up to 3 counters from target creature, so you already have an answer for the decks that are running a bunch of counters. Yeah, it's not going to be as good, but the fact that it still does something even against the decks that do have counters randomly on stuff. I mean, and in Ikoria, you're going to have lots of things with counters, but for the most part, the big things you want to answer, the Winotas, the Fiend Artisan, the Breedmoth, just all of the main things that you need to answer, Heartless Act kills them. And so there is a 2-mana removal spell that does answer all those things that will stop the big crazy thing from happening. So now you can just hold up 2 mana, and when Winota comes out in turn 4, turn 5, you have the removal spell, you get past that turn, and you should be a little bit more ahead in the game at that point. And so that's the basic idea, is that Heartless Act is definitely a game-changing card, where it's actually the card I think that will allow Winota, allow Fiend Artisan, allow Broodmoth, things like that to not be banned, because you legitimately can just play the right answers to it. And your Murderous Rider is still there as well, so we have a turn 3 kill spell as well. There's all these things, but Heartless Act, being able to have it be 2 mana instead of 3 mana is a very big deal. And I'm glad that we have it, because it'll keep the game more fair overall, because there are some insanely busted things out there. But it's going to be something I'm going to hate by the end of this set. I just know it, because I play creatures while other people play control typically, and this is going to be my worst nightmare. But at the same time, I'm very grateful that it keeps the game a little bit more fair, because I understand that that's what needs to happen. But I will hate you at the end. Heartless Act. Anyway, go to the next one. Okay, number 6, Lurrus of the Dream Den. 3 convert mana cost, legendary creature, Cat Nightmare. Sweet types, by the way. It's a life-linking 3/2, and during each of your turns, you may cast 1 permanent spell with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard. So I totally skipped the companion mode with this. I do think you can definitely be playing this with companion mode, but I think that you want to kind of remember that you can play this as a full 3 or 4 of in any deck that you want to. I think that a really aggressive black-white deck or something like that, or the Artisan deck that you're wanting to play, or sorry, not Artisan, Aristocrats deck you're wanting to play with Cruel Celebrant, with whatever else, your Cauldron Familiars, that this is just an amazing card that gives you so much more card advantage as long as it's on the battlefield. You get to pick whatever card is in your graveyard with converted mana cost 2 or less, and just cast it for free. Sorry, whatever permanent spell. So a permanent spell, so it can also be your whatever enchantment for 2 mana, or your glass casket that got destroyed. So you have your removal in the sideboard. Sorry, not your sideboard, in your graveyard. So this is really powerful. And then the companion side of it makes it even more busted, but it's more situational. So occasionally you're going to be playing a deck that just has permanents with convert mana cost 2 or less in your starting deck. I think that's going to be harder to build around and make really happen in standard, but you could do it, and you could have instants and sorceries that are more expensive than 2 convert mana costs, and then you get to have this as your companion, which the companion basically says that you put one of these into your sideboard, and then as long as your deck meets the requirements of not having converted mana cost 2 or less, then you get to have this as an extra card basically in your starting hand. That can't really, I don't think it can ever be discarded though. So it's kind of in a command zone. It's not quite the command, it's a companion. It's a really weird, I don't know, text. I'm not sure what I think about the companion stuff. Honestly, I like it. My biggest issue with Lurrus is that if it was convert mana cost 3 or less, or if this was a 2 cost, you could play some of them in the main deck as well as in the sideboard. But I think that pretty sure if they see a Lurrus come down, this is gonna get Heartless Act. It's gonna die. This is not gonna survive for very long. This is a kill on sight type of card, and that's the biggest concern, is that I feel like you're going to want more than one of these in a game. And so I don't like the companion side for myself. Like I don't really like it. I wish that you could have 3 of these in your deck and have one in the sideboard to bring into the companion cost. But because it doesn't work with its own, like you can't put Lurrus in your deck and still have it come in with a companion, then it's not very good. There are going to be some decks that come out that you're just going to have be cheap decks. Like I played like the 15 land mono black deck that this just slots right in perfectly. Like it works really well with every single card in that deck. That for sure, yeah, you can play that and it's going to work. But I think that really what you want this card for is its ability. But its ability deserves to be in this slot as well. And that's the reason why it's here in the game-changing card list, is during each of your turns, you may cast 1 permanent spell with convert mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard. The amount of card advantage that you get in a typically aggro deck will play this, but even if you're just playing, kind of a cheaper removal spell or permanents, and then having like control up on the top end, like you can play this type of thing. This would actually be kind of a fun card to play with something like, what's it called? The Second Sun. I can't remember what it is now. But anyway, there's a lot of cards in the older formats that I think that this would be kind of fun to play around with. You can still have your board wipes with this. You can still have so many amazing cards. And I love that these are dual colored companions. I think that adds a lot to them. And so this is my favorite companion of the lot. The one that's the cat elemental nightmare dinosaur lord is also a favorite. It's definitely up here as well. But Lurrus of the Dream Den is, man, it's busted. It's going to change the game. I think that I'm not positive it's going to change standard a ton immediately, but I think there's going to be a deck that's built around this, or that this is slotted into as a 3 of or a 4 of, just to have its ability. And this is going to be one of the most powerful cards in that deck. Built around things that are like Cruel Celebrant, built around, Priest of the Forgotten Gods, all of these cards that come, that if they get to stay on the battlefield, tend to win games, and now they have a way to replay them once they were removed. And so yeah, Lurrus, amazing card, really cool, gonna change the format. Next up is Gemrazor. So 4 convert mana costs 4/4 with reach and trample. Those basic stats don't sound like anything amazing, but you can mutate it for 3 mana, so a little bit cheaper. It's reach, trample. Whenever this creature mutates, destroy target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. So first off, I actually am not sure what I think about mutate. I have this in here just because I think that the fact that you can have a 4/4 body on the battlefield that also destroys artifacts and enchantments, first off, will give us a good chance to deal with all of the Fires and Inventions, all the different things that are out there. The thing that I'm most interested in is finding out first off what mutate even does. I really am so confused with this mechanic because things like Yorvo. So I think if I'm thinking how the rules work best, that this would be the perfect card to put onto a Yorvo. So on turn 3 you play Yorvo. It has 4 counters onto it. Whenever other things enter the battlefield that are green, it'll also get counters onto it. Well, Gemrazor on turn 4 can mutate onto Yorvo. I believe that they still can attack. I don't think mutate changes the summoning sickness side of things. It doesn't really have anything there. So then I'm also not sure if the counters actually stay on Gemrazor. So basically you put one thing on top and you use the base power and toughness of that thing. But I'm not sure if you get to maintain all the counters, the +1/+1 counters from Yorvo, which, you know, will have 4. It'll get 5 from this. I'm not sure because it's not actually being casted as a creature spell. Anyway, so you suddenly have a 8/8 reach trample creature that can swing in. Yorvo's biggest deal is that he didn't have trample. He didn't have any evasiveness at all. Questing Beast was better just because there was occasionally, you know, things that had, you know, 2 power or whatever that it could swing in against and have a lot of pressure, having that haste. Well, all of a sudden, you know, Yorvo, whatever else you want to put this on, you put it onto, you know, Paradise Shoot or something, and that has hexproof whenever it's untapped. Anyway, there's just a lot of really cool things you can do with Gemrazor. I think the reach and trample are actually the things that I'm actually most excited about, is the fact that it has those keywords on there. And then the fact that it also destroys artifacts and enchantments means that you can actually play it in a deck, you know, because you need to have the removal. It's an easy fit into the slot that will be main boarded, in my opinion. But I think that if the way that I think Mutate works, this is really busted and powerful. But honestly, I'm still trying to figure out what the crap that keyword even does. I'm not sure about you guys, but I feel like that's the biggest one, because to me, everyone's been really excited about how mutate works. Like you can double up lots of triggers. Like if you get double mutate on this, each mutate whenever this mutate trigger things happens at the same times. But it's also like auras, where auras are pretty good, but they're massive blowouts whenever things go wrong, and typically aren't seen play, especially in standard, where there's just removal for 2 mana, like Heartless Act. That, you know, okay, you got a bunch of stuff on there, or I'm going to mutate onto this creature. Nope, it's removed from the game. You lose both creatures. I just feel like it's such a downside. But if you can put this on, like if you can put onto Yorvo, you keep the +1/+1 counters, you don't have summoning sickness for the creature, then this is really busted. And then mutate's busted, and then I probably have a different list, honestly, of all the different things that should be in this list. But overall, I think that Gemrazor does deserve a slot in the game-changing thing, just because it's a good answer in a stompy type deck for the enchantments like Fire's Invention, like Shark Cyclone or Typhoon or whatever, and all that stuff. So here we go to the next one. Next up is Sea Dasher Octopus. So this is a mutate card that, even if other things don't really like happen, like if it doesn't keep summoning sickness, if it doesn't keep +1/+1 counters, this is still an insanely good card, because whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. You can just play this as a 3/3 flash creature. If you're playing up against a control deck, flash it in on the end step, you get to swing in, draw cards, which is huge against control. I think that this is, you know, it's kind of like the Brazen Borrower type of thing, where you can flash in, it has some sort of a finisher. Well, against control, being able to have that card advantage is better than the 1 extra point of damage. Not being able to be evasive is an issue, but if you just flash this onto something like a Spectral Sailor, which was only going to get in for 1 damage anyway, so you're in a flash deck, you have a Spectral Sailor, you have whatever else you want. All of a sudden you can flash this onto a shark that that you created with your Cyclone, and as it's attacking, flash it in, get to deal possibly 2 more points of damage. If no, the sharks don't actually work that way, because they are just 4/4s. They don't actually get counters onto them. Anyway, I think this card is really good. I think that even if mutate is not as good as I think, this gets around all the issues I was having brought up with the last mutate card. But I do think that this is definitely going to see play, definitely going to bring back the flash deck. I think that there's a lot of flash synergies anyway. I was debating and bringing in like the Slither flash card. I can't remember what it's called. It's also really good. I think that this one, though, will see more play in more decks and will be more annoying and change the format more. So it is definitely a game-changing card. Okay, in number 9 slot, we actually have a common card. 1 mana Light of Hope instant. Choose one of 3 options on a 1 mana common card. You get to either gain 4 life, which is really cool. I mean, the fact that you have this, you also get to destroy target enchantment or put a +1 counter onto target creature. This is, sorry, just target enchantment. So this is basically like Knight of Autumn, except you don't get to destroy artifacts. And you only get to put 1 +1 counter instead of, getting the body and putting 2 counters onto it. But I think the reason I'm really liking this card, first off, is that enchantments are going to be huge in this format. I think from what we've seen already, enchantments are huge in Theros Beyond Death. So our annexes that we want to kill, our Fires of Invention, our Sharknadoes, whatever else is out there, there's going to be enchantments in almost every deck that this will deal with it. So this is a 2 to 4 of main deck card almost consistently in a white deck that's wanting to have any interaction. First off, just for the destroy enchantment side of things. For 1 mana, yeah, absolutely. Against aggro, when they don't have enchantments, they have the artifacts instead. All of a sudden, you get to gain 4 life whenever you need to, or have it be a a combat trick where you get to put a counter onto a creature, and all of a sudden, first off, you killed the creature and you have a good blocker for the next turn. So Light of Hope, I think, is very powerful. Not only that, but it also gets to have a card that is worth playing in your main board, also work well with the Incubation Druid synergy. And I'm bringing this up just because I think the only card we had beforehand was Stony Strength, which I'm trying to remember if it was instant or sorcery, but Stony Strength didn't really work with Incubation Druid. It was a card that you had to add extra to it. There wasn't enough of them to make it worthwhile. But now Incubation Druid, a card that wasn't as good as Paradise Druid because it didn't have hexproof, because it didn't have as much power, all of a sudden can get a +1/+1 counter onto it in a card that you're already going to be using and get 3 extra points of ramp. So I think Light of Hope, first off, will go into so many decks that it's worth saying that this is going to be changing the format. The fact that you have 1 mana enchantment excuse me, that was awkward. 1 mana enchantment removal to deal with the annex, right away. You can still play out your stuff from the turn before, leave up 1 mana, and still have removal. Gain 4 life if you need it, which can totally change the game in combat phase. And so I'm a really big fan of Light of Hope. I think it should see more play than I think it will, honestly. I think a lot of people are going to sleep on this for about a month or 2, and then a main deck is going to be using it, and then they're going to realize, hey, that's a really good card. Maybe I should be running it because it has 3 flipping options on a 1 mana common card that's instant. This is a good card. And so I just like Heartless Act, I think this is one of those that it destroys enough important stuff, and it's easy to have in that 1-drop slot. And even if you don't use it for the enchantment side of it, you get the other 2 options. This is an easy inclusion into any white deck, in my opinion. All right, last and certainly not least, in slot number 10 is the Ozolith. And I know that I've missed a lot of other really powerful cards, and this is one that is a little bit more because I think this is going to be really fun, but I legitimately think that this is another one of those sleeper cards that we're going to be seeing be completely busted in certain decks that I think is actually worth seeing here. So the Ozolith, whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, first off, let me remind you, 1 mana legendary artifact. So pretty easy to get out into a deck that's doing anything else. You run 2 of these even in a deck. Because it is a legendary, you're not going to run too many of them, but this is basically like a 1 mana, Heartless or Hardened Scales almost type of thing. So whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters onto it, put those counters on the Ozolith. So you get to put all the counters onto Ozolith. So there was a massive board wipe, you had a few counters of like Lifelink from the Broodmoth, you had whatever else you had a bunch of +1 counters, you had First Strike counters, and then at the beginning of combat on your turn, the Ozolith has counters on it. If it has counters on it, you may move all counters from the Ozolith onto target creature. So what I like about this is that it actually helps solve some major issues with mid-range decks. First off, there's a bunch of combos you can do with this. I think that Simic Ascendancy would be really cool because once you move all of the counters onto a different creature, I believe that you'll be able to get it. Moving counters and adding counters is a little bit different, so I'm not positive how that works with Simic Ascendancy. But even still, if you had 3 or 4 +1/+1 counters onto this, you had a haste counter on this, or whatever it is, from playing like the Crystalline Giant, which is also deserves a slot maybe on this. I think it's a fun card, even though it's volatile. I think that the Ozolith actually has some potential to do really, really cool things. I think that it adds to the mid-range decks where you have a questing beast and the opponent's at 6 life, and getting in that 4 points of damage just isn't enough. And all of a sudden, because you had the Ozolith, you go to combat and you get the 2 extra counters onto it, 3 extra counters, whatever else you needed to get in for those few more points of damage with questing beast, and that will win games. And the fact that this is a 1 mana spell, and I think that what you do is you typically play 2 copies of this in a mid-range deck that is running some number of counter type synergies, along with a bunch of other good stuff that doesn't really play around with it. But the occasional times that this fills that slot, I think that it's going to have some impact in the game. I think first off, it's going to create a bunch of cool combos at some point. I think this is one of those cards that is most likely to find a way to be broken, and find a way to do really cool things with it. It is artifacts, which there's so much attention towards enchantment removal. Some of the removal there does also kill artifacts, so it's a little bit annoying because people are also trying to deal with Embercleave. But so I think it will be a little bit hard because there's a lot of removal in the format for this type of thing. But at the same time, I do think that every once in a while, the Ozolith is going to be, I think it's going to be a game-winning card. I know that I'm not making it sound like a game-changing card right now, but I'm really excited for the possibilities with this one. So anyway, that's my list. I know it's a little bit clunky and janky, but that's the kind of stuff I like. And I legitimately think that these are the cards that will, first off, see the most play in the more competitive standard formats. I think these are the cards you're going to be running into. Maybe not the Ozolith. The Ozolith was there because I think it was fun. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks so much, and bye-bye.